that your phones are on silent and to put them away. So thank you for coming to our second presentation for International Education Week. Our theme for this week is East Asia. Since the end of the Cold War, the Korean Peninsula was divided between two sides. The North under the influence of the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, and the South under the influence of the United States and its allies. The Korean War ended with a stalemate, with the two sides divided roughly along the 53rd parallel line through the DMZ. Despite the end of the Cold War, the two Koreas remained divided, despite the reunification of East and West Germany and North and South Vietnam. Dustin Bass is a veteran journalist and the author of the fiction thriller Five. He has recently completed his second novel, which deals with the Korean War. He is also a musician, an author, and a Golden Gloves champion. Dustin is an alumni of LSE North Harris and Sam Houston State University. Let us give him a round of applause for providing us the opportunity to inform us on this issue.
Hello? You guys hear me out there? Yes, sir. A little bit? Might be. Well, like he said, Professor Angela said, I'm Dustin Bass. I went to school here. When I came around the corner of the academic building, I saw that I was going to be speaking in here. And I was like, oh, I remember this place. I was in here for orientation and academic probation. So, it's not a joke, but it is a joke, so feel free to laugh. I wasn't a very good student in my studying, but yeah, I did get a journalism degree from Sam Houston. And but before I begin, I do want to say thank you very much for having me here. Thank you very much for coming out and listening to what I have to say. And thank you specifically to Professor Angeles for making sure that this took place, for having me, and for Mr. Dodd for having me come out here, putting the whole international studies thing together. And also want to nice little thank you to my good friend, Professor Olson, who was a professor of mine back about 15 years ago. So, and then just told you more or less how old I am. So, but we'll go ahead and begin. Well, that's the North Koreans. Hopefully not. But we'll go ahead and get started. I'll probably have to avoid that microphone altogether. All right. So titled my speech, Korea, the Long Journey to Division. And so what we're going to do is going to talk about the beginning of the Korean Peninsula, and then we're going to work all the way to where we are now. So if you don't mind, I'm going to try to fly through a bulk of this. So if you're taking notes, don't do like what I used to always do in my profession. Like, can you hold up a second? Let me write all this stuff down. So we'll go ahead and get started. How large is Korea? Well, Korea is about a little over 85,000 square miles. And so if you want to know how big that is, it's a little smaller than the UK. A little bit bigger. And that's Professor Angeles' drawing. I apologize. Bigger than England. Much bigger than Switzerland. And if you know anything about Syria, if you've been paying attention to any of the news, it's also bigger than Syria. If you've never heard of the UK, England, or Syria, perhaps you know about Louisiana. It's bigger than Louisiana. So moving on from there, you're probably wondering, well, how old is Korea? Well, about 2300 BC, a man by the name of Tangung walked into Korea and founded it. His father was the son of the divine creator, and his mother was a female bear. Now, chances are that's not really how it got started. So, 1500 to 1100 BC is really where historians say that's where Korea started. That's where things got started. It was really Chinese settlers that came from the feudal states of China. At that time, China was not a unified empire. And it would be about another 1,000 years before China would be unified in around 200 BC. Now, the settlers that came over, they understood, they wrote in Chinese text, literature, and so that's really where things got started. Now, the beginning of Korea started with more or less being broken up into three kingdoms. It's actually not the three kingdoms I was talking about. This is actually a Chinese movie, which I guess sort of has something to do with Korea since it started with Chinese settlers. I want everybody to relax. You're not in class. Please, please laugh at some of my jokes, because if you don't, I'm going to kick all of you out. And we'll just go with Mr. Olson because he loves my jokes. Anyways, we're going to go with the three kingdoms. It's broken up into Silla, Pakchi, and Koryo. So, we have the dates here. It remained like this for about 700 years. Not too bad. So, for about 700 years is how it started, and then Silla became really the power among the three, the main power among the three, and it unified all of these three together. It happened, I believe, in 668, unified all of them, and just a few years later, Silla, which was really now, you could call them Koreans, they moved out all of the Chinese, and then started really the Korean peninsula as we would understand. But you also had this big purple section. It's obviously not part of Silla. This big purple section was Manchuria, like an early Manchuria. It also had bits and pieces of Chinese and also from those left over of Korea. So we have this group that is still around, and as it says, lasted until about 926. And then it was taken over by the Khitan tribe, and from there, the Jujun tribe, and then you've got the Song Dynasty taken over by the Sing Dynasty, and then moving on. You'll realize if you do any Chinese history, you'll realize that just continual dynasties are created. The Ming Dynasty, the Song Dynasty, the Qin Dynasty, the Qing Dynasty, and even the Mongols being there, which we will discuss the Mongols as well. So let's get back to Korea. This was the beginning of the first dynasty, and something I want you to understand is the stability of Korea as a nation. That is something that you need to understand in order to really understand the problems that we're going to get into and how impactful and how devastating those problems were in the late 19th century and on. Is that we're two dynasties, we'll get on to the second one, but this first one is Koryo, which really was the origination of the name Korea. And so it lasted about 500 years, the Koryo Dynasty, which is in a lot of ways unheard of for a dynasty to last that long. So, for a small period of time, well, I wouldn't say small, but about 100 years, the Mongols began their reign and they attacked Korea. Now, it took 6 different campaigns. I think we have a perception of Korea as a small country, and the general mentality among people who really don't know a lot about Korea is that Korea was just being beaten up all the time by the Chinese and the Japanese, and that's not true. It's not true at all. In fact, it was the Mongols that came in, and if you've watched, what's that Netflix show? Marco Polo. Yes, we got one. Okay, everybody else is studying very hard. No Netflix, no TV, no nothing. Okay, very good for you. So the Mongols, for about 100 years, they did their reign in Korea. But it really wasn't like a reign. Korea was never part of the Mongol Empire. The thing is the connection between all of the Chinese dynasties was tributary. They were never part of an empire. They were really self-sustaining, self-governing. And that was allowed through tributary. And that continued with the Mongols. So after a bunch of fighting, and even when they were defeated, they continued to use deception and just little fights against the Mongols, even during their treaties. So the Koreans were always fighting for their independence, which is an amazing thing. It is something else that you need to understand. It has not ever stopped. North Korea, with its propaganda and indoctrination of its people, has more or less leveled that out. But in South Korea, you will see that mindset of continual liberty and continual truth, that fight for these things, has always gone on for about 3,000 years. Ladies and gentlemen, my parents. There we go. All right. So, during this 100-year period, there were 3 invasions. The Mongols had already, more or less taken over China. They had now defeated Korea. They wanted Japan. Japan was going to be very difficult, obviously. They had to cover the Sea of Japan. They tried twice, and both of their fleets were destroyed by typhoons. That was done away with. They tried for a 3rd time, but before they went off to go on the 3rd time, they went ahead and just quit. Why? The Mongol Empire was more or less crumbling at that time, and so they gave up. They decided, let's just forget about Japan and move on. So, 1336, Mongol Empire more or less moves on, and we understand Korea to be known, especially North Korea now, as the Hermit Kingdom. That phrase is not just a recent phrase. It's not a recent term. That has been a term for a very long time because, more or less from its beginning, aside from its relationship with China, Korea always gravitated toward the Hermit Kingdom mentality, the isolationism. They were very self-reliant. So moving on from the Koryo Dynasty, we move to the Joseon Dynasty, which is the most recent one, and it lasts a little bit longer than the Koryo